Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining in. Thank you to those who are also joining in from YouTube. You can rather connect from Zoom. That way, I'll be able to take up your queries more effectively. Thank you so much. So, before I start with today's session, I want to quickly ask you all uh, why do you think people are not good at English? What do you think are the challenges? What are the roadblocks? Uh, why do you think people, so generally you'll see that, if someone's good, they stay good at that language. But if someone's struggling, they keep struggling for a very, very long time. The improvement happens at a very slow rate. Why do you think this happens with English? That doesn't typically happen with any other subject that you might be studying. But why is that with English? That only few people accept at the language and most of the others are just at the struggling age. Do you agree with me? Do you agree to what I just mentioned? You can probably type in the chat box, say your answers. Okay, yes, so you guys agree with that. But why do you think this happens? Why do you think there is a gap? Why is it very difficult for people to improve their English? Any thoughts on that? So if I tell someone that, you know what, you probably have little understanding about competition law, they will take a week or 2 weeks maybe, and then they'll figure out and, they'll be better at what they were at initially at the beginning. But however, the same doesn't apply for language. Why is it so? Okay, Mukund says that as people surrounding us don't speak English, all right, that means we are not exposed to that environment. There's a limitation in terms of environment. That's correct. Any other thoughts on this? Why do you think we are not exposed to a certain language? Is that the only barrier, or can you also? Okay, so before I answer this, I would like to introduce myself. I am Vanita Bhatnagar. I work as a legal editor at Loseco. For those of you who are new here, joining in for the first time, I will give a brief introduction about what Loseco is. Loseco is an online learning education company. We prepare courses. Mostly our courses are a combination of both theory and practical in nature. The sole purpose of preparing these courses is to equip our learners with practical problems so that they're just not clear on the fundamentals of law, but they also know how to practice law. And while interacting with my students, I kind of realized that English is one of the major problems that most of the people suffer with. But despite that, I see that there is little progress on that sector. 𝗵𝗵𝗃𝗃 says that as language keeps on evolving, it is not like any other skills. All right, that's correct. But I think after interacting with my students, what I realized is that because none of them are actually taking actions to improve their English. So if I tell someone that, you know what, there are certain problems with your writing skills, they'll start taking measures on it. If I tell someone that, you know what, your concepts with respect to acquisitions are not clear, they'll start working on that. But when I tell someone that, there are problems in your sentence structure, your grammar is not proper, they don't really do anything about it. They just keep waiting, and they just think that it will one day just happen on its own. They're not actually taking out time to study grammar, or maybe to study complex sentence structures to get better at it, or to look at, when they're writing, what are the redundant words that they are using in a sentence. They're not paying attention to all of this very closely. Do you relate with that? Does that happen with you also? That sometimes, when you're aware that you're making an error with respect to your grammar, but you're still okay about it, not consciously working on it. So in my observation, there are primarily two reasons. One is that people don't work on their communication skills consciously, intentionally. Okay, they're like, we'll just learn in the process of things. They're not putting in extra efforts, or they're not identifying what are the gaps and are not trying to work on those gaps. That is one of the major reasons that why people suffer at English. They don't get better at it, they don't improve as they are expected to improve. How many of you are able to relate with what I just said? Does that happen to you as well? Okay, all right. And okay, so most of you are able to relate with what I just mentioned. The another so this is one reason, okay, and the another reason is that because obviously we all are non-native speakers of language, so we are not accustomed to be thinking in English. So English being a foreign language, we are not exposed to the language that much, because at our homes mostly people speak in their own language in a circle. So it's only a professional circle that might be speaking English language. Otherwise, rest of the people in your circle rely on your native language, right? Could be your mother tongue, anything, right? So we're not in that atmosphere where we can completely immerse ourselves into the language. Also, we are not adapt to be thinking in English. So we probably might be thinking in our own language, and then we translate our sentences, our thoughts in English. Does that happen with you guys also? Is that a challenge? All right. So to move further, so we've already identified that why most people do not improve at their communication skills. They just tell themselves that, you know what, I'm not good at communication, I'm not good at grammar, and they just keep living with that forever their life. But however, it becomes a problem when you have to, so when you're working in your professional life, and when you're expecting a promotion, when you want to move up the corporate ladder, or when you're trying to get more and more clients, that is the time when your communication skills will become a barrier. So it doesn't have a very direct impact. Rather, a lot of people for the longest time in their life will keep having this belief that I'm not good at communication, I'm not meant for public speaking, I am not good at writing is just not my cup of tea, I cannot do that. I can't speak publicly. Okay, I'm just a slow learner, right? They just say that, I'm just slow at things. For me, it takes a lot of time to read a judgment and to comprehend it and to write it. I'm just slow at it. So we automatically become accustomed to these thoughts. Does that happen with you guys as well? And all of this happens because we are not identifying what is the real problem. The real problem is not that we are actually slow. Okay, we are slow because there is a reason why we are slow at that particular task. And this is majorly because we are not working enough on our communication skills. We have developed a reading habit. Okay, we are able to read certain words per minute, and we are okay with that. We are doing nothing to improve that. We are doing nothing to improve our communication skills, right? So what I'm going to address in today's session is that how we should all work on our communication skills, no matter at whatever level we are. We may be at a beginner level, at an intermediate level, or at an advanced level. So if you visit our YouTube channel, LawSikho, you will see on 13th of January, there was a workshop done by Ramanuj and Abhyuday. You can watch the entire video. That's very helpful, wherein they tell you as to how you can identify at what level of English communication you are, whether you are at a beginner level or at an intermediate level, or how do you become a pro. They also share their tips and techniques. So how you can become pro at English communication from a beginner, right? So you can use that video to identify what are the gaps and at what stage you are. What we are going to address today is that no matter at whatever stage you are, beginner, intermediate, or advanced, you need to constantly work at your communication skills. There's always something to improve on. Okay, even if you are at pro, level, you will identify that there are certain roadblocks in your communication. Maybe you're not understanding non-verbal communication that well. Maybe you need to master negotiations, right? So this is what we're going to address in today's session, that first of all, ensure that you're working on communication always. It's a never ending process. Okay. So working on your communication skills should be a part of everything that you're doing. So if you are a college student and if you're learning new subjects, you're doing internships, at the same time, make a habit, make a schedule to work on your communication skills as well. Even if you're a working professional, no matter whatever you're doing, wherever you're working, ensure that you're taking out time to actually sit and work on your communication skills. Now, today, what I'm going to do is first, I'm going to focus on reading and understanding English, how you can improve that. Okay. And then I'm going to talk about how you can tackle your speaking abilities. Correct? In the middle, if you have any doubts, you can just post your questions in the chat box, and then I will pick them up in between. All right. So it is actually easier to learn English reading than you think. Okay. For a lot of people, they think that, if I pick a book and if I start reading, I'm going to take probably a very long time to finish it. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to discuss two techniques, staircases and scaffolding, which will help you in improving your reading and comprehension ability. So here, when I speak of reading, I'm not only going to focus on speed reading, okay, so that you're able to read faster, but we are also going to focus on comprehension, so that you are able to comprehend what you're reading. Okay, so when a house is built, it doesn't get done at the same time, right? It is not like the entire house is done in just 1 week or in 2 weeks. Everything doesn't happen together. It's a step by step process, right? So workers will have to first build some temporary structures to help keep the house standing up, to help them work on the higher parts. These structures, when a house is built, now those structures are called scaffolding. Okay, so scaffolding is also a method of learning. Now, the idea is that to learn a skill, you need to learn smaller parts that will help you build your knowledge and skills. So it cannot happen that you will learn entire English in just one day or in just a week or everything together, right? It is a step by step process, just like making a house. Okay, you start with part 1, part 2, part 3, that way. Everything doesn't happen at once. Okay. So this is also relevant when we talk of reading comprehension. Now, to really understand what you read, you might need to work on other skills first. Okay. You might need to practice reading quickly or slowly, depending upon at what speed you are able to grasp. Okay. You might need to stop choosing very difficult books and start choosing the right books for your skill level. Now, this is very important. A lot of times I hear people telling me that, they just can't read, because the books that they are reading are very boring. Now, books are not boring. Probably what you're reading is not suiting your style of reading. Or sometimes the text is so complicated that you're unable to understand. And when you're unable to understand, you will definitely not be interested in what's written, right? So for instance, if you're a law student and if you directly jump on reading Theory of Justice by John Rawls, you might not be very comfortable with the language, right? You might find it difficult to comprehend and understand. Therefore, instead of that, maybe you can start with Kafka, maybe you can start with John Grisham, right? So you, depending upon at what level you are, okay? Therefore, that is why I said understanding at which level you are is the most important thing, because only after that you will be able to create a plan for yourself, right? So figure out at what level you are, and depending upon your skill level, you will have to pick books to read. Okay, first you can start reading easier text with smaller text. Okay, slower, you can go slow with your reading and then gradually increase the difficulty level. All right, so that's what, don't start away just with John Rawls or any big jurist. You can start with something which is slightly easier for you, okay, and then move on to reading the difficult text. Now, remember this when you're working to improve your reading comprehension. and any other English language skill. Okay, so this is not just applicable for this. This is also applicable when you're working on your speaking abilities or listening abilities or writing abilities. So you first start with simpler things and keep the text small. Okay, so probably when you're reading book, it also depends upon the size of the book, right? Now, if at the first instant only you book something which is very bulky, you might not be able to finish it. And if you're not able to finish it, you will be discouraged at the very beginning. And then you will start telling yourself, oh, I'm not a reader, I can't read books. So instead of that, pick a smaller book, okay, so that you're able to complete it, right? And also something which has smaller chapters, right? Something which is easy. So you can pick that according to your skill level, at what level you are. Okay, I'm also going to discuss few steps with you that you can follow to work on your reading abilities. One is that you need to create a special time for reading. Now, as I discussed, that we need to constantly work on communication skills to get better at it. That is why most people fail at communication, because they are not devoting particular time to that. There is time for everything else, but there is actually no time in your schedule to work on your communication. And if that time is not there, how will it happen, right? There is no means that it will just happen on its own. And if it has to happen on its own, the process is going to be very, very slow. So therefore, keep a specific time just for your reading. Okay. Now, you can either do it in the morning, in the night, depending upon whatever works for you. The point is that there needs to be a specific time where probably you can start with 15 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day. It doesn't also have to be like you have to read for hours. No. Depending upon your schedule, let's say you have, maybe you're practicing in court and there is a lot of running happening. You also have to attend your client meetings. So probably you can just keep 10 minutes a day to spend on your reading activities. I mean, you can start from 10 minutes and then keep increasing it gradually to 45 minutes, 1 hour, 1 hour, 50 minutes, depending upon your schedule. Also, a lot of time, law students tell me that what are they doing in law school? They're reading all the time. So why keep a special time for reading other stuff? But see, understand here that what you're reading as a part of your curriculum or what you're reading in your professional life, okay, that is very limited. Okay, the scope of the kind of text that you're reading is very limited, and then you will only be acquainted with those kind of words, right? Your knowledge will only be pertaining just to the textbooks. You will not know anything beyond that. So to work on your communication skills comprehensively, you need to move out of your books or something that you are regularly coming across, right? Therefore, you need to keep a special time for reading, and in that reading, you're actually not reading your course books, right? This is not what I mean when I say reading. You need to put this time to read maybe a book, newspaper, anything. All right. So this also brings me to my second point, that is keep your reading resources diverse. So it shouldn't be like that, you're only reading books. It shouldn't be like you're only reading fiction books. It shouldn't be like you're only reading non-fiction. You should keep a mixed bag of everything, starting from newsletters. You can subscribe to newsletters online. There are some very good newsletters that I would recommend you should follow, like, for example, the Ken, the Quads, Quint. Okay, all of these, they have brilliant newsletters. All right, the Morning Brew is also very good to keep yourself updated with what's happening in US. They also cover world news. But for world affairs, Quads is something that I prefer. So you can follow these newsletter. All right. There's also one by Loseco. If you want to stay updated with what are the legal trends in the legal industry, you can follow that. Keep your source varied. You should be reading blogs on different subjects, not just law. All right. Because see, at the end of the day, when you will be interacting with the client, that is not a time when you only make that is not a time when you're only having conversations limiting to law. You should be able to understand the business of your client, and that is when by understanding their business, that is when you'll be actually telling the person that this is where this particular law is applicable, right? So you need to, as a lawyer, you also need to have a business sense, right? You should be able to understand the business of your client. So keep keep your reading as a mixed bag. Do not limit to just one source of reading, not just books, not just fiction books, not just novels. Include blogs, include emails, include newsletters, Twitter, right? You should also read how people are tweeting, right? You should also read how people are writing on LinkedIn, right? So keep your pool very diversified. Another thing is that you need to read the right books. Okay, write books, write newsletter, something that will help you in building your skill, right? If you're keeping yourself, again, if you're reading something that you're not interested in, you will never get time for it, right? Or if something is above your reading level, again, you'll have an instant disconnect with that. So what you're reading is very important. It needs you should be interested in that, right? And it should match your level. Then only you'll be able to dive deep into the text and understand, right? The another thing to keep in mind is that this is not an activity that we're doing for fun, right? We are doing this activity very intentionally to improve our comprehension skills, right? That is the part that we are working on currently. So when you're reading, you need to ensure that you're sitting with a notepad and a pen. And after you've read, you ask questions. What was the main point of discussion here, right? What was the author trying to say? Who were the different parties involved in the transaction, right? If you're not asking these kind of questions, that means you're not judging your comprehension skills. And if you're not judging your comprehension skills, again, you never know how much are you grasping. And then it just becomes reading just for the heck of it. And we don't want to fall for that. All of the activities that we are doing here, it's very intentional. We want to ensure that we are constantly working on our communication so that we keep getting better on it. And it will only happen when you're constantly reassessing yourself, right? So the moment you read something, okay, if you read, let's say you were sitting for 30 minutes and you read a book, after that, ask yourself questions, okay? Ask what was the text about, right? What were the most important things that happened in the text? Did anything confuse you? Okay, did anything surprise you? What are your thoughts on a particular debate that maybe you were reading today, right? Were there any parts of the text that you didn't understand, or probably some sentence structures that you find difficult to comprehend? Okay, that kind of an understanding is very important. All right, so I'll just take you through again all the points that I have mentioned. Number one is that you need to read something that is relevant for you, right? Something that matches your skill level. That is the first and the most important thing. Then you need to create a special time. So don't tell me that, you know what, I've been reading cases since morning and my reading quota is done for the day. It doesn't work like that. You need to specifically take out time for your reading. And third thing is that you are assessing yourself. You need to ask questions. What did I read? Was I able to understand what I was reading, or am I still confused with certain structures, or there are still parts of the text that I'm confused about? Correct? So these are the first three things that you will do. The fourth thing is that you need to improve your fluency. Now, what is fluency? Anybody? Fluency is basically your ability to, how quickly can you read and understand something? Okay, fluency is that how smoothly you are able to read the text. Now, when you read in your head, you should have a certain rhythm to the words. The words should just flow naturally. Like when somebody is talking, right? That is what fluency is. Okay, so that's how you should read English books, like a native speaker would do. So improving fluency can be simple, okay, as choosing slightly easier text. So when you're working on your fluency, you'll even choose even more simpler text, right, to read, because currently your primary focus is not comprehension. Okay, your primary focus right now is that you want to improve your fluency. You want to make it a slightly more faster, right? So you'll improve your reading even when you're speaking. It will also make reading feel more fun and natural. It's because you're able to do it very quickly. Okay, so when you're actually doing this activity, so when you look at words, just by the sight of it, you'll be able to understand what is it saying. And here it's crucial that you can also time yourself, right? Just time yourself and see how much time is it actually taking you to complete 1 page, 2 page, 3 page. How many words are you able to read in a minute? Time yourself to work on your fluency. And once you are able to establish, so even if you do this for a week, okay, you can just test yourself, okay, every day for maybe 10 minutes, 20 minutes, just test yourself. What is my speed? How am I moving? Right? Am I getting any better at it if I'm doing it every day? Right? Of course, there are chances that you will get better at it. So once you are able to get fluent at reading, okay, when the speed becomes faster, then you can again go on and start reading difficult text. Okay, now when you come back to the difficult text, maybe first you want to keep it slow. You might want to read slowly because you want to ensure that you are actually understanding whatever you're reading. Okay, there is no point of just reading like that without understanding of issues. So first, try speeding up. Check how, what is your best speed. Okay, in that case, the text maybe that you're reading could be simple as well. That doesn't matter, but the focus here is at that time is to increase your speed as much as you can. Once that is done, once you have achieved that state of fluency, you again come back to reading more simpler text, more difficult text, right? Now while reading this difficult text, you might go slow, but you've already your speed has already increased, right? So this time you can again slow down, but keep measuring yourself. And then with this difficult text, okay, the difficult book maybe you picked for reading, that time also keep measuring yourself. And eventually you will see that though you started slow, though your per minute, so maybe for a simpler book you were faster while reading, but with this difficult word at the beginning you are slow, but eventually within a week you'll again experience that you're fast. Okay, you can also do this with judgments if you want, right? But measure yourself, time yourself. If you're not doing that, again, how will we know, right? You remember when we were in school, every time after every class we were given a report card. What was the purpose? The purpose was that whatever we are doing in a year, it's measured. And after school, like after college, for most people, we stop measuring what we are doing. We stop measuring uh, what is my writing speed, what is my reading speed. We don't measure all of this. And when we are not measuring, how do we even know that whether we are actually progressing or not? So measuring is the key, right? Keep measuring your reading speed with simpler text, with difficult text, and then only you'll be able to move, right? Another thing is that ask a lot of questions. Okay, speaking of questions, ask them. Ask a lot of them. The more you question what you read, the deeper you get into the meaning. Okay, asking questions is also a good way to make sure that you're understanding what you're reading. You'll also be not able to come up with a lot of questions if you've not read well, right? So you can start, maybe initially you can start with simpler questions like, what is happening in the text right now, who is speaking here. Okay, this all of this will also help you in staying focused to what you're reading. The next set of questions could be slightly more difficult, wherein you want to understand what is the impact of this decision, what is the impact of this transaction. If you're reading a policy, maybe you want to question what is the impact of this policy, right? And all of this, now you'll be able to answer all of these questions if you're actually understanding what's written, right? So this is again a barrier that a lot of law students face when we give them policies to read or when we give them rules to read and we ask them, what is the impact of this new legislation? And they're not able to understand why this happens, because they're just reading what's written. Okay, they're not able to understand the whole literature of it more carefully. Okay, so for developing that, you should be reading a lot on that particular subject as well. But at the same time, it becomes a practice that you are able to see just beyond the words. Okay, so for that, you constantly keep asking questions. Okay, another and last thing on this is that read different kinds of text and read it again. So this I have mentioned earlier as well in one of my previous webinars, that you need to keep your reading pool diverse. Now, not in terms of just the kind of material that you're reading, but also the subject matters that you're reading. So don't just keep reading on law. Okay, you want to change that as a field. You might want to introduce yourself to different so those of you like reading fiction, okay, they are anyway exposed to a lot of different kind of stories. But nevertheless, if you're not a fiction reader, even if you're limited to non-fiction reading as well for now, expose yourself to different worlds. Okay, don't restrict yourself only to one particular type, right? So maybe sometimes you want to pick a Canadian author, sometimes you might want to read someone from Australia. You'll also see how colloquial language in Australia is different from that of Canada. Context setting, the way of reacting to things, everything will be different, right? So basically, unfortunately, what happens with us is that we are only exposed to US, okay, American English. We are only exposed to American movies and American literature. However, I would really request that all of us should read different kinds of text, okay, involving different people. That will open up a host of understanding with different types of subjects, right? So these are the couple of things when it comes to reading. Then we're going to look at speaking, and then we're going to address writing. Okay, these are the other two things that we will address, right? But before that, I'll just take up questions from the chat. So Mukesh is asking that on what basis shall the reading material be selected? That's a very interesting question. So you need to look at your interests, okay? So if you're a beginner, if you're just at the beginner level and reading is not an habit, so maybe you want to read something that you're very interested in. Maybe let's say I'm always interested to know more about Virat Kohli. So probably I'll pick up any book that's either based on cricket or is based on him, right? So that's how, so initial, so when you're just breaking the barrier and when you're just building a habit, you probably want to read something that you love. Okay, so I'll give you my own example. Now, when I started building the habit of reading, okay, so in 2018 I gave myself a challenge that I'm going to read one book every month. And the first book that I picked up was Good Life and Good Vibes by 𝗵𝗿𝗃𝗃. Now, why I picked this particular books was because I love reading motivational text. Okay, so for me, anything positive, anything motivational becomes fun. So I did not want to put myself into a frame where I'm reading complicated things. I wanted to read something light. So that book is a very small book. All right, you'll be able to finish it in less than 30 days. Okay, so that's why I picked that book. Okay, so something which is short, not too bulky, and something that you actually like reading. Like for me, it was motivational text. It could be anything for you, okay, depending upon your interest area. So whatever you like, if you're a person who enjoys cooking, so maybe you want to explore that domain and read something around that. Okay. Weber was asking what type of general reading should one do? Can you please write them down? I'll give you a few options. One, of course, is that you should be reading newspapers, all right? Pink papers, as we say it, your Economic Times and all of that, Financial Express, these are relevant to understand business, specifically if you are planning to become a corporate lawyer or if you're working in that field. Understanding of business is of paramount importance. So you want to first start with that. Okay. And then moving on, you should also be subscribing to different newsletters. All right. Newsletters are also generic in nature, right? I particularly like the Ken a lot. Okay, they pick up one story every day, and they're writing on business, but their style of writing is very fun. Okay, they write in a story format, as if they're narrating a story. You can subscribe to them. The Pakshi is asking aloud reading or reading in mind. I would suggest whatever you're comfortable in the very beginning. Okay, so So for the people who are just starting out, the most important thing is that you're sitting for those 30 minutes and you're reading. That tick mark is the most important activity for now. Okay. So you can identify that, let's say for initials, let's say that you're not comfortable reading in your mind, right? You're more comfortable speaking aloud. So you might want to practice that. Okay. That will also, so if you're reading aloud, you will automatically be also very conscious about the way you're pronouncing words. So maybe you want to do that for the beginning, but eventually when you're reading in mind, you're a lot more faster. Okay. Because when you speak and you read, that is comparatively that's going to make your speed is slightly slower. Okay. Because we are able to speak slowly, but we can read faster. Okay. So initially, if that what's work for you, let it be. Measure yourself, but keep challenging yourself eventually through the process. So at whatever speed you are, whatever technique that you're following, you want to keep challenging and experimenting new things. Don't get comfortable. Okay. So let's say if you're comfortable reading aloud, after a week, maybe challenge yourself and say that, you know what, for this particular week, whatever my speed is, I'm going to stick to that speed, but I'm not going to read aloud. I'm going to read in my mind. Maybe for the next week, you say, I'm going to stick at the same speed, but neither I'm going to read aloud, neither I'm going to read in mind. I'm not going to speak while reading. That's the important thing. Okay. So even when you're reading in mind, you're not speaking, you're just reading. So that's how you can keep challenging yourself during different weeks. Do one accents matter while communicating with professionals? Yes, definitely. See, if your accent is not clear, okay, the other person will not be able to understand what you're saying, right? So you need to ensure that your pronunciation is clear. Okay. I'm not saying that if you're speaking with a person from UK, you adopt British accent. You don't need to adopt to any accent. Okay. It can be natural to what it is. Okay. Whatever comes naturally to you. But the more than accent, what is important is the pronunciation of your words. Your pronunciation needs to be clear. Because, of course, while speaking, you would not want to pronounce something incorrectly, right? So at a later point, we can gradually shift from our interest books to one or more detailed reading legal field. Of course, of course. So even when you started reading legal text, okay, you might want to identify what do you enjoy more. Do you enjoy reading about business cases, or do you enjoy reading more on constitution? Do you enjoy more on jurisprudence? Do you enjoy more on mystery? And depending upon that, you can pick your book. Okay. Like for example, let's say if you're interested in criminal proceedings, maybe the Trial by Kafka is a good read for you. If you're interested in mystery, okay, maybe you want to read John Grisham. Okay, John Grisham gives you insight into law practice. Okay, it's a fun read. So maybe you want to start with that. Others could be if maybe you just want to read case laws, right? So for that, maybe you can read the 10 landmark judgments by Zia Modi. Okay, so there are different books available in legal field as well. But first you start with something that is of your interest so that you're in your habit, and then move on to the other kind of readings, right? Which are more relevant to your subject areas. 𝗵𝗿𝗃 is actually asking one more question. How do you manage time for reading all these diverse topics? What's your method? So what I particularly do is I club it with an existing habit. I might have discussed this in my previous webinars as well. So whenever I'm picking a new habit, I just sync it with the existing habit that I'm already doing. Okay. So when I started reading, what I did was every day in the morning, I have a cup of warm water. When I'm having my glass of water, I sit down and I read the book. Okay. Because the habit of having water every day in the morning is already there. Okay. I already have that habit. I've been doing this since a very long time. I just had to ensure that with this habit, I'm also doing something else. So every time I know that, by now my brain knows very clearly that, when I'm drinking water, I'm also reading. at that same time. Now, and this is how I build my habits. Every time I'm picking something new, I just club that with something else that I'm already doing. Okay. For instance, maybe, so one of the worst things that I feel is if you tell yourself that before I go to sleep, I will sit and read. That's not probably a good way to start building your habit of reading specifically, because at the end of the day, you're already so exhausted, you might not find any time for reading. So don't start on those lines. Okay. Instead, figure a morning time. Okay. When you're more active. I mean, for a lot of people, they're more active at night also, depending on what works for you, but pick a time where you're more active, not when you're exhausted. So for me, reading at night never works because I'm already exhausted after the whole day. I really have no patience to read anything at night, so I do it in the morning. So whenever you're active in the beginning, of course you want to do this activity when you're more active, because after reading the whole one page, two page, three page, whatever you're reading, you'll also be asking questions to yourself, right? You want to assess your comprehension. So you do it at a time when you're more active and club it with an existing habit. I hope that answers your question, 𝗵𝗿𝗃𝗃. Once reading habit is done, what to do for better communication? Yes, we're just coming to that. Ma'am, does an audiobook also serves the same purpose as reading a book, or physical reading of book is a better option? Of course, physical reading is a better option because there is no alternative, okay, of physical reading. So audiobook will help in building your listening capacity, right? So when it comes to communication, there are different things, okay? There are your listening abilities, there are your speaking abilities, reading abilities, and writing ability, okay? There are four. So in communication, there are these four things, okay? So audiobook will focus more on your listening activity, but not on your not with respect to your reading habit. So if you're able to read, let's say 30 words per minute, you will be there at that limit only. You'll never be able to increase that if you're listening audiobooks, okay? So audiobooks are helpful when you're working on your listening abilities, when you want to develop that. So a lot of people find it difficult that they're not able to understand. So when they're listening to somebody, they're not able to comprehend completely what the other person is saying, right? So that is also a roadblock for a lot of people. So with these four skills that I just mentioned, okay, reading, listening, speaking, and writing, you need to first prioritize which is most important for you. And then in the first week, maybe you work on one. In the second week, you work on another. In third week, you go on with the third one. Constantly keep measuring yourself. Maintain your own report card, right? Otherwise, if you don't measure, you'll never know in which direction are you moving, right? So measuring is important. And then so audio will only help with listening. It will not help with reading. I hope that answers your question, Mukesh. Does learning one new word every day help? Legal words and other words from editorials of newspaper. Oh, Vedant, of course, that's very helpful. Okay, so if you're wanting to build your vocabulary, this is one step that we suggest to everybody, that you should learn one new word every day. That's how you'll be able to expand your vocabulary. But a lot of people struggle with this because of two reasons, okay? Number one is that whatever they're learning, they're not using. Again, there is no point, okay? So whatever word that you are learning, you need to use that word. If you're not using that word, you'll constantly forget, okay? So with vocabulary, there is one concept, okay? So if you draw a circle, okay, there will be a lot of words that you know the meaning of these words. If I just show you the word, you can understand the meaning, you can understand the context, you know how to use that particular word in your sentence, okay? However, the words that we actually use are very limited. Okay, so let's say if I know 100 words, I know meanings of 100 words, but in reality, I will only be using 25 words. Does that happen with you? So if you're constantly learning new word, you're just expanding the other circle that I mentioned, right? So you'll keep adding a lot of words to that bigger circle, But however, your focus should be working on the inner circle, where you are expanding to use the words that you already know. Okay? Are you able to follow, Vedant? Do you agree that you know a lot of words, but in reality, you use very little words? You don't use all the words that you know, right? Your communication, your vocabulary is limited to very less words, right? But when we are constantly focusing on just learning one new word, we are expanding just our outer circle. We are not expanding the inner circle. How do you expand the inner circle? Is by, instead of picking that word from a dictionary, right, pick it up from your everyday life and rely on your memory for that. Okay, so let's say you read a new phrase, okay, in the newspaper, right? You searched the meaning, you remember it. Now try and make sentences using that word. Okay. Also practice pronunciation, because sometimes we are not able to use a word in a conversation if you are not confident about the pronunciation. So you also need to work on the pronunciation of that word, right? So first is that you pick from your memory, you recall from your memory whatever you have read, whatever you have heard, any new word that you came across, you pick that word, and then you practice pronunciation, okay, so that you also develop muscle power for it. And then you create a sentence, you make your own sentence. So maybe first you want to look at Google, maybe how a sentence structuring is done for that particular word, and then you and make a sentence on your own as well, so that you also know how you will use that word in a particular sentence, right? So focus on that inner circle first, and then maybe you want to work on your outer circle. For pronunciation, we should use which accent? You can use your I don't know if we can call our accent as Indian accent, but just the way you naturally speak. Okay, uh, it's not necessarily that you see, now most of the text that we follow is British. Okay, we follow British English rules also mostly, so maybe you want to rely on that. But as such, in today's world, I don't think so you should limit yourself to British or American, because if you're interacting with global clients, you'll be interacting with people from all over, not just. So initially we stuck to British because we were mostly interacting with people from the common law countries. However, that's not the case now. So just Google the word, and you can hear the pronunciation and follow that pronunciation. Okay, anything that's widely accepted, right? So if you think that for a particular word you're more comfortable in the British accent, you can pick that. If you think you're more comfortable in the American accent, you can pick that. There's no hard and fast rule that you have to stick to one particular accent only. All right, it should be correct. That's more important. Being correct, having a correct pronunciation is more important than picking British or American, right? You can choose either. All right, any other questions, anybody? Then we will move on to the next aspect, that is your speaking. Okay, so a lot of people again struggle with their speaking abilities. They feel that they're not very confident. It's not that they don't know their legal skills. It's not that they struggle with legal knowledge, but they feel they are not very confident when asked to make a conversation with a client, with a foreign client, in a meeting, or any formal scenario. They kind of feel that they're not very confident enough. How many of you relate with that you find yourself not confident enough to speak on impromptu topics? All right, so this happens, number one, because of lack of preparation. Okay, you're not prepared, you're not. So confidence does come from your communication skills as well, but a large part of your confidence is also based on how well you have prepared yourself. If you're prepared really well, you'll be more comfortable with this. Confidence is nothing. Confidence is just about being more comfortable with what you're doing. Okay, we all can confidently sleep, right? There is no lack of confidence when it comes to our own comfort zones. Okay, if I ask you to call your best friend, there is no question of feeling underconfident, right? Because you're comfortable with that scenario. You're comfortable speaking to that person. So confidence is more about being comfortable of what you're doing, right? Now, how do you get comfortable? You get comfortable by practicing. So let's say you want to become a good orator. You want to become a person who's able to, participate in client meetings, is able to participate in different competitions. For that, one and foremost thing that you'll have to do is you'll have to practice a lot. Okay. How do you do that? So let's say if you're participating in a competition, be ready with your speech. Again, here we will be at different levels. Okay. So just from the very starting, you will not become perfect. Just from the very starting, you will not be very comfortable with impromptu conversations. Okay. For the beginners, it is more about preparation, and then you gradually move ahead, right? So the same concept that we spoke about of the house, okay, it happens in a phased manner, step by step. The entire house is not created in one day. Similarly, your entire speaking skills will not go from beginner to pro in just one day. It will happen in a phased manner. But what you need to do for it is you need to constantly take actions. When I say constantly take actions, means that you constantly put yourself in situation where you are required to speak. Okay. So if you want to become better at public speaking, you got to make it a habit and constantly keep doing that. Okay. You constantly need to interact with an audience. Then only you will get better at it. If you're not doing it, if you're not putting yourself in those situations, you will never be comfortable. And if you're not comfortable, you will never have that kind of a confidence in you. Okay. Here, see, now, be it your writing skills or speaking skills, for both these things, you need to have good grammar. Okay. Listening and reading is more passive. Okay. You are not actively doing something like as compared to writing and speaking. So here again, your grammar also plays a very crucial role. So if you're not confident on your grammar, you might feel underconfident when you're responding to a question. Okay, let's say a judge asks you a question and you're responding to a question. Now you might be very confident when it comes to the legal aspects of it. Okay, but you might feel underconfident as to the grammar that you're using. You might be confused, oh, whether it's the correct sentence structure or not, right? So you need to identify again, what are your challenges? Is your challenge your grammar? Then you need to work on that, specifically when it comes to writing and speaking. Because if your grammar is what? So for speaking English, you need to follow certain rules, right? Language has certain rules. Now you need to, for speaking or writing, you need to have a good understanding of these rules. When you have a good understanding of these rules, you're confident that, okay, maybe there might be gap in my legal understanding, but there is no gap when it comes to my grammar. Okay, my grammar is on point, my pronunciation is on point, and all of this happens when you're comfortable with grammar rules. So what I know is that most of us has read English only in their school, so they are only acquainted with the grammar rules of what was taught in school. Few of us remember them even now, few of us forget. And that is why we always feel that, we are not confident with grammar. So to make yourself confident on grammar, you need to constantly revisit it. Okay, you need to be sure about your grammar. You need to be sure about the rules that you're using. Why do you see people? So your English teachers will always be very confident in speaking and writing. Why does that happen? Because they're using those rules in and out every day, right? And we are not. So what you need to do is you need to ensure that you're working on your grammar as well constantly. So if you are aware about tenses, but you're not aware about when to put your sentence in an active voice, passive voice, pay attention to that, right? If you are inadvertently mixing tenses, be more aware about that. Okay, be more aware about grammar rules, right? That will automatically help you in your communication, in your speaking abilities. The second thing is, so first, before going with impromptu conversations, try participate in forums where probably you're required to moderate a session. Okay, probably somewhere where you can prepare yourself, right? that will at least familiarize you with public speaking. Okay, speaking in front of a lot of people. At least you'll be familiarized with that. Okay, so for that, it's not necessary that at the very beginning you start with complicated tasks. Okay, you might want to first take simpler activities, that is moderating a session maybe. Okay, uh, you can do it. So if you're in college, you can do it at a college level also. If you're working professional, currently, uh, for some reason, pandemic has been a blessing in disguise for most of us. Okay, there are a lot of options. There are webinars happening. You might want to collaborate with somebody and moderate 1 or 2 sessions, right? Expose yourself to public speaking, then only you will get better at it. Otherwise, it will be a forever struggle. So instead of telling ourselves that I'm not good at communication, okay, you can develop that, you can work on it step by step. First, participating in conversations where you're required to have a speech. Okay, so if you've prepared your speech and if you have to just deliver that, if you're able to do that successfully, then maybe you can move ahead and participate in more impromptu conversations. That will also help you when you have to argue before a judge, because a judge will ask you questions and then you should be able to think on feet, right? So these are a couple of techniques that you can follow to work on your speaking abilities. You can also, currently in the online model, you can also sign up for teaching roles wherein you are required to teach kids. So when you're teaching kids, automatically again you will have to speak in English. So that can also be helpful, right? So that was with respect to speaking. Coming to writing, I would suggest that at least write 1 article every month. That's the basic minimum that you should be doing. Again, it's a new habit that you will be developing for those of you who are new to writing, right? What do you do here is maybe you patch it up again with any kind of activity that you're doing on a daily basis. Maybe instead of writing a whole article, you may want to start writing something on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever work for you in form of captions or post. Maybe you can design that first and then move on to writing more complicated pieces. Okay, writing articles or research papers. All right. Again, when writing comes, you need to be careful about the flow of the entire article. It shouldn't look like that, you have just picked up pieces from here and there and put everything together. That way, your article might be very informational, well researched, but if it doesn't have a flow, that's not going to communicate well to your readers. Okay, so writing also have a lot of confidence. With writing, I suggest that it is better to have a mentor who can give you quality feedback on what you're writing. Okay, so that you're aware about structures, you're aware about flow, you are aware about uh, how to write an introduction, how to write a conclusion, how to address the pain points of your audience, how to structure the whole thing, right? So with writing, there are more nuanced concepts. I would suggest that you have a mentor for writing. You can maybe find someone on LinkedIn or so. Here, I would like to mention how LawSikho has developed a course where they help you with all of these activities that I discussed today, be it speaking, writing, listening, or writing. And all of this is done. So here, English is not just taught like a language. This is taught, the entire curriculum is based in a sense that suits lawyers. Okay, I'll just tell you about different activities in brief. So there are activities wherein you're required to write a complaint, you're required to reply to a notice, you're required to draft a legal strategy for the case and reply to a client. Okay, how would you gather information from client? Those kind of activities are there in the English course that we have. I'm putting down my number here for your reference. If anybody of you want to know more about the course, you can reach out to me. All right. Besides that, if you have any questions, you can let me know and I'll just take it up. Also, you can give me your feedback on today's session. Did you learn something new? Whatever you've learned, you can put it in the chat box. Anything that you found insightful from today's conversation and you're going to take back with you, you can mention in today's session. You can also let me know if the session was helpful for you. You can drop in your feedback. And those of you who want to know more about the course, you can reach out to me on my number. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining in. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you were able to learn something new today. Do share your learnings in the chat box, whatever you picked, anything, any one thing that you picked, and you got to implement that. Oh, that's interesting, Vaibhav. Glad to. Yes, Abhinav, communication is very important. Otherwise, it's going to become a roadblock at one point in another for success. You should read widely. You should read daily. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody.